So I released a review of the S5 a couple of weeks ago. Now I'm holding the box because I'm actually filming on the S5, and this is the closest thing I can show you to what the S5 is. Now if you haven't seen it, why don't you go and click up there, because I feel like you probably need to see that one before you watch this video, because this will kind of touch on some of those aspects that we looked at in the first video. I wanted to talk to you today about how I use the S5 for commercial use now. So I've had it for a couple of months now, and I've shot with it on probably maybe 3 or 4 different commercial jobs. Now I want to preface that by saying most of the work I do is for small and local business, and so a lot of the work they like to use it for is for web or social media or things like that. Some of the work will even sit on Instagram, so I'll even shoot some of that vertically as well. Now I also want to say that I'm not being paid by Lumix, but they did give me this camera and the kit lens, so take it for what it's worth. But I will also say that all the opinions in this video, as well as all my other videos, are mine and mine only. All right, so just quickly, I'm going to break this video up into a couple of different areas, basically the good and the bad, and we're gonna weigh it up and see whether or not this is the camera for you and whether or not it suits the workflow that you have. Okay, so we'll start with the colors and the actual picture. I think the picture is beautiful in pretty much most of the modes. Some of the slow motion areas, it does degrade a little bit, but the colors are always beautiful. It's easy to grade, so from a workflow point of view, there's no troubles there. Now, speaking of picture profiles, I'm actually shooting in Vlog right now, so if you have a look, this is basically what it looks like without the LUT that I've placed on top. I know there's been a few people complaining about autofocus in Vlog. I wonder what you think. You know, if I come in a little bit closer, you know, if I come a little bit further away, how does that look to you? Now for me, I haven't had any issues shooting in Vlog. What I like to do is I like to put I think it's called the Mon LUT, over the top of the Vlog. And that seems to help out with the autofocus a tremendous amount. It also helps with me seeing what the final picture is going to look like before I actually shoot it. So if I look over at my screen here, I can see roughly what it's going to look like when I'm finished. The one thing that really surprised me was the 4K 60 mode and how much I would actually use it. Knowing that it was a cropped image into APS-C, I mean, the image is so beautiful, I kind of just dealt with it. And what I found was that when you do crop into an image, you're actually losing the softer edges of the lens that you might be using. Now, most lenses are sharpest in the middle, and so when it crops in, you're actually using that center part, which is the sharpest. Sometimes it was actually useful to get that extra reach by cropping in a little bit more too. But if you still want to shoot 4K and you don't want that cropped in look, well, you can still go with the one that I'm shooting on right now, which is the 4K 25. You're not going to get that slow-mo, but you know, if you want to vlog or you want to do things like that, or you just want to get 4K with the full width of the sensor, mate, this is the one for you. And I feel like it's just nice to have options. You know, you can shoot that cropped in image, or if you don't want it, you can shoot the full width of the sensor as well. Now I want to talk about the super slow-mo modes. I found that they're obviously not as sharp as 4K, but I don't think there's many cameras out there that offer that super slow-mo type of stuff, you know, the 100p or the 120 frames a second, really sharp. But I found that it was a little bit sharper than most other cameras that offered 100p or 120p. Now there's a quick switch on the back which you can use to switch between manual, continuous or single autofocus modes. And I found that I use that actually a lot more than I thought I would as well. It became much easier, and actually knowing where that switch was made it a lot easier than either flicking it on in the lens or going in through the menu systems like I have with other cameras. Now let's talk about the new firmware update that just came out recently, and it seems to find focus much quicker, much easier. It seems to hold and it doesn't seem to pulse as much. Okay, so now speaking about autofocus, I know a lot of people ask me to make a autofocus video on how to get the best out of the autofocus. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to run an Instagram live, and I'm going to discuss all of the things like autofocus and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're not following already, jump onto my Instagram, follow along on there, because I'm going to be doing a live quite soon, or some Q&A on this camera. So if you've got some questions, jump over onto my Instagram and follow along there, and we'll discuss that whole thing over there. One of the things that they added was the 4K Cine mode. And basically that just gives you a few extra pixels to play with in your 4K. It's kind of nice to have those few extra pixels to play with and the higher bitrate, but I've actually found that my computer struggled to actually render out those files. So I'm not 100% sure whether or not I'm going to stick to using that mode. but I may only use that for maybe the really high quality projects that I really care about the image quality and I really care about how much grading I'm going to be doing to the image in the end. I know a lot of the other cameras I've complained about not having higher bit rates in the past, so it's nice that there's now an option for a high or a low bit rate. You've got all the choices in the world now. All right, so now I want to talk to you about some of the quirks that I found with the lenses that I had been using. And one that really made me feel like such an idiot was the autofocus and manual focus switch on this lens and the one that I'm actually using as well. Now this lens here, I accidentally bumped it and I didn't actually realize that I had bumped it until days later. I actually thought I had broken the focusing on it, or even worse still, I actually blamed the camera a little bit for how bad it was focusing, because it just wouldn't focus no matter what I did. So if you have a look here, this is the manual focus dial. So if you're doing manual focus, but if you flick that up and down, that basically turns on the autofocus or the manual focus. And so obviously, you know, picking it out of the bag or doing something, I must have bumped that and I had no idea. It's one of those quirks for me that was very frustrating until I worked it out. Now that I know it's there, it's actually quite nice to be able to look through something, and if you want to switch over to manual focus, to go like that rather than to, you know, get your eyes off the camera, find out where the switch is and then start playing with it. Okay, so I want to talk about weather sealing and just overall body construction of this camera. I found that the more that I've used it, the more I really understand that this is a sturdy piece of equipment. I shoot at the beach a lot, you know, and I'm having to deal with things like salt water or sand or wind and, you know, rain and those types of environments. And so I'm constantly having to think about my equipment and how I can protect it. And I feel like I don't have to think about it as much when it comes to this camera, because it just seems so well built. You know, for me as a newbie to Lumix or Panasonic, I'm really impressed with the body construction and the weather sealing. Let's talk about the battery. The battery by no means is terrible. With this one, I mean, if you do decide that you want to be shooting all day, you need to start thinking about that prior to then. You need to make sure you have spare batteries or charging options in between shooting throughout the day. Now, the lenses that I've used, I felt are very, very good. They're also very expensive, but in saying that, like, I don't think you're ever going to go wrong with investing into lenses. They seem to always hold their value. They're only going to make beautiful lenses, so the lenses that you buy are going to be valuable to the day they die. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. For some people, I don't think for me and what I do, for the most part, I'm limited in any way. But have a look at the lens lineup, see if there's any gaps in there for you, and you make your own decision on basically what lenses you need to do the work that you need to do. The EVF, the resolution in there doesn't seem to be as high as maybe some of the other cameras on the market. In saying that, I think it matches a lot of the other ones, but maybe just me coming from a little bit higher end cameras, I'm used to having a bit of a higher resolution image looking through the viewfinder. You know, at the end of the day, I think if it's coming down to you're shooting video more than you're shooting photo, I think this camera is pretty much a no-brainer. But I think overall it really depends on the type of work that you're doing. You know, for photo, it's probably not as simple as it is for video, because video, they've just packed pretty much every feature you can think of and slammed it into this tiny little body. And so I feel like if you're a video shooter, I think there's something here for you. For photo, it's not as simple. You know, like, it depends really on the type of work that you do. Okay, so that's pretty much it from me. If you're not following along, hit that subscribe button. I would love for you to follow the next video that we have coming out. And if you really enjoyed this video and you found some information out of it, why not hit that like button? It really helps me out. It really lets YouTube know that I'm doing something that somehow means something to someone. But that's it from me. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.